I'm Jim Anderson. I'm the chair of the Clive Davis Department of Recorded Music. The Clive Davis Department was founded in spring of 2003, and it had been in the works for a couple of years before that. Clive Davis wanted to try to get people in the music industry to have them have a much broader background and to have them have an educated background. He had a choice. You know, he's an NYU alum, and what he wanted to do was he didn't want to put it in the School of the Arts. He didn't want to have it in a School of Education. He wanted to put it in a School of the Arts. So, you know, I know he went around and talked to many of the schools here at NYU, and he wanted it to have a BFA degree. And so what you would have is someone that could enter the music industry that would have a broader background than just being an engineer or just being a musician or just being a business person. The idea is to kind of put together all those disciplines and to be able to kind of cross-pollinate all this kind of thing. So if you have a business interest, you'll know a little bit about production and engineering, and you'll know something about how to work with an artist, and vice versa for the engineers. You also get the business side of it and the production and the artistic side. And so we're trying to combine all these elements together. They can go over and take certainly anything from music business and also from music tech, and but also you have all of CAS to take from. And also what they're getting here is also history and criticism. They're also learning the history of producers and the history of contemporary music. You know, a lot of the students that come into the program, you know, they're only 18 years old, and a lot of them only know the music that they've been exposed to over the last maybe 15 years. You know, the music that we might know would go back to you know, the Beatles and before. And there's a vast area of music that they really are unaware of. And if they came from a family that perhaps exposed them to this, they're actually very lucky. But most of the students, it's very surprising sometimes how spotty the knowledge of music really is. You know, and it's generally not very broad sometimes. And so the idea is to be able to give them the breadth that they should have. You know, when you walk into a session or working with an artist, you want to bring a little more to the table than just what's happened over the last 8 years or something like that. The first year here you would take an all-day studio class. We have one course that's called Conversations with the Hitmakers. And it's almost kind of a format, interview format, like you would have someone like a Phil Ramone come in, and you would listen to Phil talk. You also have a chance to actually ask questions and hear directly from the people that would you might be working with someday. And also you're bringing in, you know, the heads of Atlantic Records, J Records. Clive Davis even comes in once a year to talk with the students. He also, interestingly enough, opens up his business meeting once a year to our students, and so they go to J Records, sit there, and actually listen to Clive talk to his minions and discuss the projects that are being released. So we're able to do things like that. We are now putting in a songwriting course and a theory course. In the studio course, we will do an element of theory and get them ready for that. But we originally, when the course first started, we didn't have any music courses. It was more of a pure producing approach. As we watched how the students were developing, we realized that there really needed to be more of a music component to the curriculum. So we added a songwriting course and a music theory course. The students also many of them take privately and will take voice lessons or guitar, piano, things like that. So which we also encourage too. But there has to be, you know, you may not be the best musician, but you need to be able to, again, speak the vocabulary of a musician too. When I think back upon the journey I made, it's sort of like everything that we're teaching to the students now is sort of like everything I've picked up over the last, my college education and through the last 30, 35 years of work in the industry. Because when I was coming through, there was no recording music departments or things like that. So I went out and got a music degree, and then at the same time worked in the recording studio at the university, and then took other courses outside of that, and sort of put that whole package together. And then 25 years of freelancing sort of gives you a little bit of business skill. And so we're trying to give them a jump start. You know, it shouldn't take you 35 years to get to this point. And so that's the approach.
Do you try to teach them entrepreneurial skills?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. That comes a little bit later, because the first year is really just an acclimation of music production and music industry. And then really starting in the second semester of the sophomore year, they would get into business and entrepreneurship. And we'll also do that in the capstone project that they'll do at the end of their fourth year. They'll try to tie this whole thing together. Some students do come in as kind of budding artists. But it's interesting in that some of them actually have come up with the awareness of, maybe I don't want to just be an artist. Maybe I want to be able to guide and work with other artists. That I have found quite a bit. I think the ones that really are the true artists will go to the music school and will take the conservatory programs. It's the ones that really want to be more behind the scenes. You know, again, we are approaching, next year we'll be in our fourth year, and we'll finally have a senior class and then graduating. And we'll see where they go, you know. I've got maybe, I think, one or two that I would say really could go off as really artists. And then I have quite a few more that really have kind of a good business sense. And some of them are actually right now even running their own record companies already in the, so, you know, sort of like the way Def Jam started on 14th Street. We've got a couple of those already started. You know.
They should be so lucky.
Yeah, yeah, and I think they will. You know, but also, you know, some of those students were the ones that you could even identify when they were freshmen. You know, there's just sort of like something about them. They have that special thing that you know that they're going to move on. The rest of them really are developing, and you can see that too. You know, and so the idea is you really need to support the people that are there, and then you need to bring the other ones along and really kind of help them both. And you're going to have that in almost any program, you know. And most of the people that really have that, what do you want to call it, the je ne sais quoi, you know, had it from the beginning. You know, you probably noticed it when they were very young. I mean, musicians I've known since junior high school, you know, they were great musicians then. They were still the best of the batch when they started out. My background was, I always was fascinated by media and music. My father always told the story about how, I think by the time I was 3, I'd worn out 3 record players. And, you know, when you think about back in the early 50s, if you wanted to play records, you had to be, as a 3-year-old, to have the dexterity to actually know to get the little screwdriver and take the needle out, put a new one in and screw it back in. You know, when I think back upon it, I mean, you started very quickly. I mean, things now are too easy. You just throw it in and out it comes. But if you wanted to listen to quality music, I mean, you had to really do something about it. So my training was as a musician. I was a French horn player, and I went to Duquesne University, but interestingly enough, my parents said, make sure you get that music education degree. Don't just get the conservatory degree, because you never know when they'll come in handy. And most of my siblings are all teachers too.
Really?
So as I was at the university, there was a book by Alec Nesbitt called The Technique of the Sound Studio. And I honestly had just read it pretty much like a novel. I mean, I just found it interesting. I was always fascinated by tape recorders and record players and all that kind of stuff as I was growing up. And so there I was reading about BBC technique, and one day as a sophomore walking the halls of the music school, the dean of the school and my piano teacher were talking, and they said, oh, he could probably do it. And I said, excuse me? I said, what are you talking about? They said, oh, the recording studio, would you like to run it? I said, sure. And right there, handed me the keys to the recording studio. And myself and another fellow took it over. It had been running very badly and wasn't very well organized and all that. And we took the place and shaped it up. And so over the course of the next 2.5 years, it was one of my on-campus jobs, was to record every recital that came along. Yeah. And some of those tapes made it to the radio station, which was, at that time, had just become an NPR affiliate. They were one of the first signatures to the NPR and CPB agreements. So in 1973, when I graduated, they gave me a position at the radio station as one of the engineers. Being there, I started looking at what was at the station and what was needed and what wasn't happening. And I still had access to the recording studio at the music school. We turned that into our production room, and we started developing spots and promotional pieces and things like that. And what was a summer job then turned into a full-time position at the station as a grad assistant. But also NPR was just starting at the time, and I was listening to NPR and started thinking, this is pretty interesting stuff. You know, it was brand new. Nobody was doing any kind of radio like that back then. And a position came open in NPR, which I applied for and got. And so I, in November of 1974, moved to NPR. And honestly, I'd never run a recording studio in my life, a real recording studio. You know, the one at the university was an Ampex 350 with like a 4-channel mixer on top and that kind of thing. And we had outfitted, I think the biggest mix we ever ran was maybe 10 inputs there. I've got a real recording studio in front of me, and live on-air talent, live on the air. And so I basically learned by doing at NPR. And I was one of the few people there that actually had a music background. So they shifted me over to doing some music programs there. So we did Jazz Alive, and the concert shows, the opera, the classical programs, and all that kind of thing. And I had played in the jazz band in the university, and that was the music I really liked anyway. So I did a majority of the jazz recordings for NPR. So my first jazz recording was Ella Fitzgerald at the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival with Tommy Flanagan, with that trio, and Harry Sweets Edison and all that. Straight to 2-track.
Incredible.
Yeah. And so I always tell the students, so I really want to embarrass myself, I'll play my first recording. And then they'll say, well, who is it? No, it's Ella Fitzgerald. And Stevie Wonder. So it was that thing. But it was a live 1-hour concert. And you had one crack to do it. So, and at the same time that whole time we did the Jazz Crusaders. We did U.B. Blake, Mingus. I mean, it was great training. But it was also live to 2-track. There was no backup. There was nothing going. You had to already in your mind know what it should sound like. And so working in radio, listening to all our music, playing music, really helped. And I was at NPR through 1980, and realized I could probably break off and do freelance work. And had a chance to move to New York City and then start really working in real recording studios here. And I think my first real album project started in 1984, and that was a Frank Foster, Frank West project. And then there was another Bud Shank album. It was This Bud's for You with Bud Shank, Ron Carter, Al Foster, and Kenny Barron. And so I had like 3 projects straight off, very close together, all with Kenny Barron. And I kept saying, and I said to Kenny, geez, I guess if I have work, you have work. You know, it looks like that. And it was exponential after that. And so over the course of now, 22 years or so, I think I've done about 1,600 records or something like that.
1,600?
Something like that, yeah. You know, because you can do. There were times a label would come in like a steeplechase, you do 2 a day. And so some of that work was live to 2-track based on the radio experience. And then some of that was based on kind of, you know, people hearing work, people being handed off to the next client or next record company and all that. So it's, yeah, it's somewhere around 1,500. So out of that, it's been, I think it's 26 Grammy nominations and 6 Grammys or something like that. But you know, but out of that, you know, they're 22 out of 1,700. Well, that's not very good. But it's been extremely rewarding. You know, when I think of the musicians I've gotten to work with. You know, when I have the satellite radio playing in the office all the time. There are times I look up and it's, you know, something I've done. Maybe it could be 1982 all over again. You know, but to hear some of my material mixed in with classic, you know, classic Lee Morgan or Wayne Shorter, and then there's you know, some material I either worked on a long time ago or it's brand new to get mixed in there. It's really quite nice. You know, I think of the older musicians I've gotten to work with, like you know, Ahmad Jamal or Billy Taylor. These are people I grew up listening to. You know, and then all of a sudden, that's when you become the person that's kind of helping them. You know, they become dependent on you. You know, and so you know, you have the background of knowing what it takes, where they're going, and now you're the next person helping them out. So it's really quite. It's a great feeling to be in. But the interesting thing was, whenever they were looking for somebody for this position, you know, they would see music people that didn't have education components, or education people that had no music contacts, and somehow I was the right balance. So, so it all seems to have worked out. The skill set that I personally try to really teach them is the vocabulary of working in the studio and working with the artist, and also working with the record company people. You know, the record company person could be themselves at this point. The other thing I try to teach them is how to listen. How to listen to monitors in the studio. How to listen to what the musician in the studio is saying through the glass. You know, so much of it is what's unsaid, and what really is the meaning behind someone saying something. We also do a very extensive set of training listening drills, and that really helps when you're listening to mixes that come back to you from a mastering house. You have your original master and you have the mastered version. What's been changed? Can you articulate that? Can you hear it? You know, is it an EQ difference? Is it a level difference? Is it a compression difference? Can you hear these various elements that have been applied to your mix? Do you like it? If you do, great. If you don't, how can you articulate what the problems might be and how you might be able to have an idea of how to improve it? It's been interesting over the last couple of years, because we've had students come in that think they want to be engineers, and they have that training, but they're finding that they would prefer to be in the business side of things. And so they've already got that engineering skill set, but now they're actually stretching and turning into more of a business person. Now, ultimately, perhaps that person could even run their own company, or maybe they could even run their own recording studio. You know, I think all of these students are going to be the people that are going to change the face of the music industry, because you know, the old thing is, if it's not broke, you know, if you don't fix it if it's not broke. But things are kind of broken, and we need people to fix it. So I feel that all of these programs are going to make a difference. I like working with the freshmen, because what it does is it allows me to sort of get them on the right foot, get them moving in the right direction, but also it helps me get to know them. So as they come in as juniors and sophomores and seniors, I've spent a fair amount of time with these people, and I've now seen them. We're in our third year right now, and I've seen these students grow. You know, it's sort of like, it is leaps and bounds. You know, I've seen them kind of go from maybe like a kind of a shy 18-year-old to somebody who really feels secure and is really standing up and starting to really look around and know where they might be able to kind of fit their personality into the music industry.
That must be gratifying.
It really is. I mean, it's. I've sat in on some classes. I mean, I'm off to go off to one shortly, but watching them perhaps make a pitch, sell a band that they're working with, and really being able to actually articulate what it is about the band that they like. What are the real salient points of their of this band that they've got? So I sat through a whole evening of pitches, and it was really quite remarkable to see these kids moving on. They all take in varying degrees of what they've learned over the classes, and then are really, you know, out it comes. It's really quite something. The job of a music producer is manyfold. It's to serve the artist, or to serve the product, the ultimate product. Now, you might have to be an engineer for some time of that. You might have to be the music arranger at some point. You might also have to be the guy that orders lunch. You know, the thing that you want to do is you want to be able to know exactly what your skill set is, and when you need to bring in other people. You know, I'm strong in engineering. I need an arranger. I'll bring in an arranger and work with this. Maybe I have the band that can already arrange. Maybe we need, you know, percussion put in, that kind of thing. You know, you're trying to recognize what you're lacking. And so perhaps we've got this whole package together, but now we need to reach out and go into we need to get this band a program. We need to get them some publicity. We need to get them some work. So you're reaching out and you're finding the right manager, and also then not getting screwed on the deal. So they've had business law. They've had all those kind of courses that would actually try to set up the red flags if you don't see something right, that kind of thing. It's healthier. I think it's much better than it's been in the past. You know, last probably around 2001, 2002, 2003. Those were pretty sad times. It was tough times. I think it's getting, it's improving. It's definitely improving. It can't be any worse than what it was. That I would have to imagine. But the projects that are out there, I think, are getting more interesting. You know, the thing that I'm not quite sure about is what all the mergers will mean. It could mean the growth of independent productions and independent labels. And now with the fact that you're actually selling tunes sometimes rather than whole projects or whole albums, that could change the scene too. It's almost like we're selling more singles, but without. We're not selling little pieces of plastic and putting them in stores and getting them out to people's houses. That whole model has changed. But the whole iTunes Store, iPod thing is a whole. In fact, it's almost you'd almost say that could trace a change in the industry almost to that point when that came online, which was about '03, something like that. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes now with the video iPod. The whole internship program, the way that we would know interns in the music industry has kind of changed a little bit. There are no staff engineers anymore. Most studios are really staffed with assistant engineers, and then the guest engineer comes in and works. You wouldn't have sort of like an A&R recording with Phil Ramone at the helm, and then people coming in and assisting Phil for X amount of years and then going off on their own. That sort of situation doesn't exist anymore. That's where the schools, I think, become very important, because that's really the place where they're learning the tools of the trade and then moving off and working with other engineers. We have actually a very good internship program. It's based on the film and TV model. And we have probably a base of about 200 businesses that are looking for interns. And because our students can take, I think, up to, 4 semesters of internships. And it's with major companies. It's like Sirius Satellite Radio, Broadway Video, major companies in New York City. But they are real jobs. You're not just going and collecting coffee and sharpening pencils. These are jobs that are vetted by the internship director. And they are in communication with the people that are supplying the internship. And there's an agreement that over the course of the semester, this student will do X, Y, and Z. And it's a considerable position that these people are being put into. We've had students being, the assistants to CEOs of major record companies, things like that. So they're actually, it's beyond just being like an assistant in a recording studio. And I think, if you've gone through this program, you want to move a step beyond that, which I think is why it's a better position to be in than say coming through like a strictly engineering program, because I think you'll have more to bring to the table. A couple of years ago, I wasn't so certain. I almost felt I saw things going a bit awry back in 2000. I mean, I had many conversations with people in my industry saying, "What's going on here? I don't think it doesn't seem healthy." I just remember as a freelancer, I knew what I was doing 3-4 months in advance, and really started watching that slip away to a matter of weeks, and things kept going along. And then 9/11 occurred, and some companies just found that very convenient to kind of just draw a line and say, "We're not going to do these projects." And but some very real things occurred where you had, especially if you were dependent on foreign clients, people from Asia or people from Europe, they weren't traveling. And so many of us watched, 2-3 months of work just dry up just like that. That's, I think, going away. One thing I do is, for the last year or two, I've been going to Meetum in Cannes and the Music Business Conference, and taking a good look at how the rest of the world is looking at the music industry, and starting to find out about, I think last year the big thing was ringtones. Over here in the States, not such a big deal. but the rest of the world, this is a very, very healthy industry that's going on. So I think you really have to kind of pay attention to almost a bigger picture, and be able to, maybe be the first one to come back, first one on your block, to know what the next big thing is going to be. Well, new technology, we're still applying it to the old technology, and trying to balance the two out. As far as kind of web-based things, I think that'll come under some of the kind of marketing courses that they could take. There's over at the Stern School, they have the entertainment media technology courses, which are really business oriented. But so far, we don't have anything in the way of kind of web type things. But I'm sure, and I'm also thinking, I don't think I've had any students ask me about that. Because I think the reason I don't ask about it is because it's assumed. It's already there. It's already happening. If you're going to promote a band, you're going to come up with a website. It's understood. There's no other way to do it. If you are looking at if you're shipping material around, you might easily just do it on an FTP site, that kind of thing. This is now the way everything does work. So it's almost like it's not new technology. It's kind of, it's the way things operate. We have the film school, and so it's not really video, but more kind of long-term film, long-form film modes. There is kind of a music video aspect that they have over at the film department. We're going to get more and more into those areas as we go. We're building a new studio right now, and when we get that up, it'll be a 5:1 surround room, and I'm looking to be able to do more film soundtrack work, scoring, things like that, and I think more of that's going to come along. There's also a radio station that we need to become more active with, and really need to think more new technology with, as far as streaming other streams. Every school, every department could have their own stream up on the web. Could be informational, could be musical. There's many ways that we could kind of use all the things that are going on at the university, and kind of help package them and things like that. It's funny now. Even just this week, I've got a couple of students working on major projects for the university. The Tisch school has their gala tomorrow night. The tracking for the voices was done at our studio. We've got another project that we're doing with Liz Swados called The Reality Show. We were requested to record the show, so we're going to bring them in, and it's really the equivalent of doing an entire Broadway album with a fairly large ensemble of singers. And so I was able to turn that over to 6 students and a GA, and say, off you go, good luck, you have the skills. We've been doing sessions. I've been working with Dave Schroeder and bringing in bands. The first year, I didn't have really the freedom. I actually didn't even have help. We were pretty much a fairly small program, and we didn't have any. We had, I think, 1 teaching assistant to share among everybody, maybe 2 at most. And so what I was trying to do at the time was to fit everything into the school day. And the students needed more access to the studio. So we were able to build out our base of teaching assistants to help us kind of man the place longer. And so in doing that, I started working with Dave, and we would, every afternoon in the studio class, in the morning we would talk about various issues. In the afternoon we actually do a session. So, last spring, I think we did 28 sessions, and those were the freshmen. So now, we're kind of back almost to ground zero with a new crop of freshmen. We have to introduce them back into, here's how a session works, here's how you get it flowing. So the first sessions tend to be a little bit bumpy. You know, the start time is usually not, the downbeat time is maybe an hour later. And so, again, it's sort of like going to a school where you're having your hair cut, or a school where you're having your teeth fixed. You know, there's going to be an element of, it's not going to be 100% like working in a live studio, you know. There's going to be a few bumps along the road, but by the time we get to second semester, it should flow pretty well. So last year, second semester, we did all the work with Lenny Pickett, and those sessions went very smoothly, very well. Everything was on time. By second semester, I expect these students to be up to that speed, because here's the thing, they're learning on the job. They're learning an SSL K-series console. They're learning how to kind of plug everything in, get it working, and get it working in a very professional manner. And that takes time, you know. And you know, they need to learn how to focus. They need to learn how to concentrate on the job at hand and not drift. And you know, that's hard for 18, 19-year-old to kind of just, you know, focus in and not, so like a puppy dog that kind of is not being yanked back by the leash all the time. So the idea is to be able to learn. You're learning by doing, and that kind of thing is not the kind of thing you can teach. The only way you can do that is to, in fact, many times we'll have something will occur, and that's when I'll stop the class and say, okay, now look what just happened here. This was said, this is going to be, in fact, there have been many times somebody will say something, and I'll say, we shouldn't have said it this way, it should have gone this way, because this is what's going to happen. Then the next thing you know, from the studio, back comes practically the response that I said is exactly what's going to happen. And you know, it's not because I'm a wizard, it's because I've been there before. So the idea is to show them, you know, either that or someone has said something, and I'll say, here's the way we should say it, and I'll say it the same thing but differently. They'll hear that, and I've actually heard them go, very good. You know, it's sort of like, it's, you know, it's all the things that we've learned. For example, we had Tuesday, somebody, we were starting a take, and it just didn't start off well. You know, rather than get on the talk back and say, come on guys, that really was awful, let's go it again. You know, I just jumped in there and said, hey, we had a little problem in here. Can we just get that going one more time? And so there's no pressure on them to perform better. It's you know, it's an old trick we use in the studio all the time. Problem's my fault. I'll take the blame on this one, or blame the machinery or something like that. And you're showing them how they can kind of defer some of these problems. If you feel that you have to go into the business, you feel that you have to do something with music, then if you feel that drive and that burn, then you have to do it. And then, so okay, then you need to kind of investigate the talents that you have. Really take a good self-assessment and say, I can do this. I can play piano, or I can sing, or I can play guitar. Okay, that's great. What else are you interested in doing? What other skills do you have? Do you get along with people? You know, so much of the work in a recording studio or the music industry is just getting along with the person that's next to you, if they're in the band or if they're in the studio. It's a very collaborative thing, unless you're going to work in a room all by yourself, and that's a pretty lonely way to go. But because you're completely dependent upon your own skills, and you know, there aren't many Mobies out there, but there's a lot of people that do work well in groups. I would look at that. I would I would also read a lot. I would get the popular trade magazines, get the EQs and the mixes and read those. Also, I would get some books out, like the practical recording technique book and some simple, even recording for dummies, get some books like that. Start reading and understanding what the process is all about. If there's a recording studio near your home, go hang out in the recording studio. Go watch people work. This may or may not be the life for you. It's not an easy life at all. There's a lot of luck and serendipity that comes along too. And then get to know some musicians. Make a band. Just get some guys that have a couple of guitars and a drum set and go in your garage and thrash about and see what comes out of that. You never know. In the music industry, there are a lot of jobs behind the scenes, and especially, it's always changing. If you know music and you have a little bit of technical skill, you could work for an advertising agency. So many of these, in fact, think of every time you hear music, somebody had to record it, somebody had to play it, somebody had to produce it, somebody had to manufacture it. There's a lot of jobs to get, even the music that you hear in the grocery store playing on the air. And when you think of all the music that's behind commercials, you think all the music that's behind television shows, those are all jobs that somebody had to do. So of course, there's, I think about my parents, it took them probably 20 years to figure out what I was doing. Somehow I was making a living that was fine. But I do remember the shock of coming home and saying I want to go to music school. But I knew I could make something of it. Who knew what that was going to be? So that's another reason why I feel like I can identify with these students, because I was sort of in that same position a few years back. To make it in the music industry, it's you need to have a good work ethic. You need to be disciplined. You need to be eager, and you need to also, I think, have a very positive influence, positive aspect to your personality, and someone who is really willing and able to get things accomplished, and sometimes somebody who has the foresight to know what needs to be done before it's even asked for. And that kind of person is always the kind of person you want to have around. It's that person that is just ahead of the game. And the person that really comes to every project and maybe brings a little extra something to the table.